The city slept under a blanket of frost, its towering buildings casting long shadows over the empty streets. The wind howled through the alleys, biting at exposed skin, punishing those who had no refuge from its cruelty. Among the forgotten souls of the urban night was a small figure curled against the brick wall of a closed diner, her breath forming tiny clouds in the frigid air. Her name was Tasha, 12 years old, with dark eyes that had seen too much and a heart that refused to harden. She clutched the edges of her thin, frayed jacket, a hand-me-down from a charity, been pulling it tighter as another gust of wind sliced through her. Beside her, a tattered backpack held her only possessions, a half-empty water bottle, a worn-out Bible from her grandmother, and a single photograph of the woman who had once been her whole world. Tasha had been on the streets for months. After her grandmother passed, the system failed her. Foster homes were overcrowded, temporary shelters turned her away when beds ran out, and the streets became her reluctant home. Yet, despite the hunger gnawing at her stomach and the fear that crept in with the darkness, she held onto one thing with unshakable faith: prayer. Every night, no matter how cold, no matter how tired, she whispered to the sky. Not just for herself, but for others. The elderly man who slept under the bridge. The young mother begging for spare change. Even the wealthy strangers who hurried past her without a glance. Tonight was no different. She bowed her head, her small hands pressed together. Lord, thank you for keeping me safe today. Please watch over everyone out here. And if there's somebody who needs you extra bad tonight, show me how to help. As she opened her eyes, the sound of a sleek car pulling up to the curb broke the silence. The door of an upscale restaurant swung open, spilling golden light onto the sidewalk. A man stepped out tall, dressed in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's rent, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. Tasha recognized him. Daniel Kensington. A name the city knew well. A millionaire. A titan of business. A man who had been photographed in boardrooms and charity galas, though rumors whispered his generosity was more for show than sincerity. He adjusted his cufflinks, barely glancing at the shivering girl a few feet away. Most people in her position would have asked him for money. $1, a scrap of food, anything. But Tasha didn't. Instead, she spoke softly, her voice steady despite the cold. Sir? Daniel paused, his expression already shifting into the practiced indifference of a man used to ignoring pleas from the less fortunate. He turned, expecting the usual request. But what came next was something he never saw coming. God told me to pray for you. A beat of silence. Then, Daniel Kensington laughed. A sharp, dismissive sound. Pray for me. His voice was laced with amusement. Kid, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What do I need prayers for? Tasha didn't back down. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet knowing. Money don't heal a broken heart, sir. And just like that, the laughter died in his throat. Something in those words struck him. A nerve. A memory. A truth he had spent years burying under contracts and acquisitions. His smirk faded. His chest tightened. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Kensington felt something. Little did he know this was only the beginning. The neon glow of the restaurant sign flickered above them, casting uneven light across the sidewalk. Daniel Kensington stood frozen, his polished shoes rooted to the pavement as if the ground itself had shifted beneath him. The homeless girl's words hung in the air between them, sharp and unexpected, like a crack in the perfectly constructed glass of his life. Money don't heal a broken heart, sir. For a man who commanded boardrooms, who negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, this child's quiet certainty unnerved him. His first instinct was to walk away, to dismiss her as naive, to retreat into the armor of his wealth. But some strange pull kept him there. Tasha didn't wait for permission. She reached out, her small, dirt-smudged hand hovering near his. May I? She asked. Daniel should have refused. He never let people touch him. Not casually. Not intimately. Physical contact was a transaction, a calculated gesture in business or fleeting pleasure. But this was different. This wasn't about power. Wasn't about control. Against every instinct, he gave a stiff nod. Tasha closed her eyes. Her fingers, rough from the streets but warm with life, gently wrapped around his. And then she prayed. Not a rehearsed blessing. Not a generic plea for blessings. But a prayer that seemed to pierce straight through him. Lord, she whispered, this man needs you. He's got money, but his soul is hungry. Whatever hurt he's carrying, whatever walls he built to keep people out, break them down tonight. Let him feel your love like a flood. Let him know he ain't alone. In Jesus' name, amen. Silence. Then, a single tear escaped Daniel's eye. He didn't even realize it had fallen until he felt the dampness on his cheek. His breath hitched. His throat tightened. And suddenly, like a dam cracking under pressure, the tears came. Not the quiet, dignified kind, but great, heaving sobs that racked his frame, that bent him double right there on the cold concrete. Memories surged unbidden. His daughter's laughter, years ago, before the divorce. Before the custody battles he'd won with expensive lawyers, but lost in every way that mattered. The hollow victory of signing the merger that made him a millionaire the same night his father died alone in a hospital bed. The countless faces of people he'd stepped over, ignored, because acknowledging their pain would mean facing his own. Tasha didn't let go of his hand. She just stood there, solid as an anchor, her small presence steadying him as he shattered. Passers-by stared. A couple exiting the restaurant whispered. A valet hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. But Daniel didn't care. For the first time in decades, he couldn't care about appearances. When the storm of emotion finally ebbed, he wiped his face with trembling hands. He looked at Tasha, really looked at her, the frayed edges of her sleeves, the quiet strength in her eyes, and saw not a charity case, but the mirror of his own brokenness. How? His voice was raw. How did you know? Tasha smiled, soft and knowing. God told me. A beat. Then, decision hardened in Daniel's gaze. He reached into his pocket, but this time, it wasn't for a dismissive wad of cash to assuage his guilt. Come with me, he said. And for the first time in her life, Tasha stepped into the warmth of a luxury car not as a beggar, but as someone seen. Someone chosen. What happened next would change them both forever. The black sedan glided through the city, like a silent shadow, its tinted windows reflecting the blur of streetlights and neon signs. Inside, the air was warm, scented with leather and something faintly citrus. Tasha sat stiffly on the buttersoft seat, her fingers pressed against the smooth surface, as if testing whether this was real. She had never been in a car like this before. Had never been in any car where the seats didn't have cracked vinyl or the lingering smell of old fast food. Across from her, Daniel Kensington stared out the window, his face half-lit by passing street lamps. The tear tracks had dried, but his eyes were still red-rimmed, his usually immaculate posture slightly slumped. The prayer had hollowed him out. And now, in the quiet hum of the car's engine, he was trying to understand why he had invited this homeless girl into his world. Tasha spoke first. Where are we going? Daniel didn't answer immediately. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure. He had acted on impulse, something he never did. His entire life was built on control, on precision. Every meeting scheduled, every interaction calculated. But this was uncharted territory. My home, he finally said. Tasha's breath caught. She had seen mansions before, of course looming behind iron gates in the wealthier parts of the city. But to actually go inside one? The thought was equal parts thrilling and terrifying. The car turned onto a tree-lined boulevard, the houses growing larger, the lawns wider. Then, the iron gates appeared, ornate and imposing, sliding open as the car approached. Tasha pressed her face to the window, eyes wide as the mansion came into view, a sprawling estate of stone and glass, lit up like something from a movie. The car stopped. The driver opened the door, and Tasha stepped out onto the cobblestone driveway, her worn sneakers scraping against stone that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned. Daniel led the way, his shoes clicking against the marble steps. The front door opened before they reached it, a uniformed housekeeper standing at attention. "Good evening, Mr. Kensington," she said, her polite smile faltering only slightly at the sight of the disheveled child beside him. Daniel didn't explain, just nodded and guided Tasha inside. The foyer alone was larger than the shelter Tasha had stayed in last winter. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister gleaming under the soft glow of recessed lighting. The air smelled like flowers and something clean, like money and privilege distilled into scent. Tasha stood very still, suddenly aware of how out of place she was, her dirty clothes, her tangled hair, the way her very presence seemed to disrupt the sterile perfection of this world. Daniel noticed her hesitation. "You're safe here," he said, and though his voice was still the firm tone of a man used to giving orders, there was something softer beneath it now. Something almost gentle. He turned to the housekeeper. Prepare a room for her. The blue guest suite. And have Marta draw a bath. She'll need. He glanced at Tasha, taking in her threadbare jacket, her too-thin frame. Everything. The housekeeper nodded and hurried away. Daniel led Tasha further into the house, through rooms that seemed to stretch endlessly, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a sunken living room with a fireplace large enough to stand in, a dining table that could seat 20. Tasha's head spun. Do you live here all by yourself? She asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. Yes. There was a story in that single word. A loneliness Tasha recognized. She didn't press. They reached a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a palace. A four-poster bed with silk sheets. A vanity with an actual mirror that wasn't cracked or foggy. A balcony overlooking a garden lit by tiny fairy lights. Tasha's throat closed up. A woman, Marta, the housekeeper, entered, her arms full of fluffy towels and what looked like brand-new clothes, still with tags. "The bath is ready, miss," she said kindly. Tasha looked at Daniel, suddenly unsure. He understood. You can stay here tonight. No strings. Just rest. And then, because he didn't know what else to say, because this entire night had upended every rule he lived by, he turned to leave. Mr. Kensington? Tasha called after him. He paused. Thank you. Daniel didn't respond, just gave a slight nod and closed the door behind him. Alone in the hallway, he pressed a hand to his chest, as if checking whether his heart was still beating. It was. But something inside him had shifted. Something he couldn't name. Downstairs, in his study, he poured himself a drink, but didn't drink it. Just stared at the amber liquid, thinking about a homeless girl who had seen through him in a way no one else ever had. Upstairs, Tasha sank into a bathtub so deep and warm it felt like being hugged. She closed her eyes, letting the heat seep into her bones, and whispered the only words that made sense in this surreal turn of events. Thank you, Jesus. And so, in a mansion built for one, two broken souls began to heal. The morning sun spilled through the sheer curtains of the blue guest suite, painting golden patterns across the plush carpet. Tasha stirred beneath a mountain of blankets, so soft they felt like clouds. For one disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was too large. The air smelled too clean. The silence was too complete, no sirens, no shouting, no rustling of other homeless bodies shifting in the cold. Then she remembered. The prayer. The millionaire. The mansion. She sat up so fast her head spun. The room was even more breathtaking in daylight. Sunlight glinted off the polished furniture, making the whole space glow. Her backpack, her only possession in the world, sat neatly on a velvet chair by the window, looking absurdly out of place in this palace. A knock at the door. "Miss Tasha?" A woman's voice, gentle. "May I come in?" Tasha clutched the blankets to her chest. "Why, yes." The door opened to reveal Marta, the housekeeper from last night, carrying a tray that smelled like heaven. "Good morning. Mr. Kensington asked me to bring you breakfast." Tasha's stomach growled at the sight. Fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, golden toast with jam, a bowl of fresh fruit that looked like jewels, and her eyes widened hot chocolate with whipped cream. Marta set the tray on the bed with a smile. "There are clean clothes in the dresser for you. When you're ready, Mr. Kensington would like to speak with you in the sunroom." Tasha could only nod, her mouth already watering. As Marta left, she stared at the feast before her. This wasn't just breakfast. This was a miracle on a silver platter. She ate slowly at first, then with growing hunger, savoring each bite like it might disappear. The eggs melted in her mouth. The bacon crunched perfectly. The hot chocolate was so rich it made her toes curl. Halfway through, she realized with a start that she was crying quiet, grateful tears dripping into her toast. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Daniel Kensington paced the sunroom like a caged animal. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built a financial empire, couldn't believe what he'd done. He'd brought a homeless child into his home, had given her a room worth more than most cars, had ordered his staff to treat her like family.
Why?
Because of a prayer? Because she'd seen through him when no one else could? The sliding glass doors opened. Tasha stood there, dwarfed by a sweater that was still too big despite being the smallest size the housekeeper could find. Her hair was clean and braided neatly. Her face glowed from the scrubbing of expensive soaps. But her eyes, those were the same. Deep, knowing, old beyond her years. Daniel cleared his throat. "Did you sleep well?" Tasha nodded, clutching the hem of her sweater. "Best sleep ever." An awkward silence stretched between them. The billionaire and the beggar. The man who had everything and the girl who had nothing. Yet somehow, in this moment, they stood on equal ground. Daniel gestured to the table where a second breakfast waited. "Join me?" Tasha hesitated, then sat. The sunroom overlooked the estate's sprawling gardens, alive with morning birdsong. It should have been peaceful, but tension hung thick in the air. Daniel spoke first. "About last night. Why did you bring me here?" Tasha blurted out. The directness startled him. He studied her for a long moment before answering truthfully. "I don't know." Tasha tilted her head. "That's the first honest thing you've said." A laugh burst out of Daniel, real, unexpected. "You're not afraid to speak your mind, are you?" "Nope." She popped the P defiantly, then softened. "You needed help. God told me to help. That's all." Daniel's smile faded. "And what makes you think I need help?" Tasha didn't blink. Rich people don't cry like that unless they're hurting real bad. The truth of it hit Daniel like a physical blow. He looked away, out at the gardens where the sprinklers had just clicked on, creating tiny rainbows in the spray. "I have a daughter," he said suddenly. "About your age. I haven't seen her in 2 years." Tasha didn't gasp or offer pity. Just waited. "My ex-wife got full custody. Said I cared more about money than family." He gave a bitter chuckle. She wasn't wrong. Tasha reached across the table slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her small hand over his. "You can fix that." Daniel looked down at their hands as large and manicured, hers small and still slightly rough despite the bath. "It's not that simple." "Sure it is." Tasha shrugged. "Love's always simple. People make it complicated." The wisdom in those words struck Daniel silent. How could this child, this girl, who'd slept on streets, understand life better than he did? A phone buzzed on the table. Daniel glanced at the screen. Another business call. Normally, he would have answered immediately. Today, he silenced it. Tasha noticed. Smiled. Daniel took a deep breath. "Tasha, what would you say if I offered you a place to stay? Not just for tonight. For as long as you need." Tasha's eyes went wide. Her lips trembled. For the first time since they'd met, she seemed truly speechless. Daniel hurried on. "You'd have your own room, tutors to help with school, whatever you need. And in return," he struggled for the right words, "in return, you could teach me." "Teach you what?" "How to be human again." Tears welled in Tasha's eyes. Not sad tears. Not happy tears. The kind that come when someone offers you the one thing you never dared hope for. She didn't answer with words. Just threw her arms around Daniel's neck in a hug so tight it knocked the breath from his lungs. And for the first time in years, Daniel Kensington hugged someone back. And so began the most unexpected friendship, one that would heal wounds money couldn't touch.
The end.